Aston University of Bahia and Santa Catarina. I'd like to say welcome to participants and speakers to the first seminar on renewable liquefied gases. Our seminar is divided in 4 sessions, and along the presentations, all of you are welcome to use our chat bot in order to put your comments and doubts. And at the end of each session, we will be discussions with the speakers based on your questions. So to officially open our seminar, I'd like to invite the governmental representatives from Brazil and the UK, starting with Mr. José Mauro Ferreira Coelho, Secretary of Ministry of Oil, Natural Gas, and Secretary of Ministry of Mines and Energy. And after, we have a recorded video from Simon Wood, General Consul from Rio de Janeiro, Director of Climate and Energy. So, Mr. José Mauro, the floor is yours. So please switch on your camera and microphone.
Thank you, Priscilla. Good morning, good afternoon, everyone. Your Excellency, Mr. Simon Wood, General British Consul in Rio, Mr. Bram Graber, CEO of SHV Energy, distinguished audience, ladies and gentlemen. It's a great honor for me to be with you today and open the first seminar on renewable liquefied gases, challenges, perspectives, and opportunities. Brazil and the UK have a strong collaboration in energy sector. We are developing together the Brazilian Energy Program, and we expect to work in a partnership to develop the renewable liquefied gases in Brazil. LPG is a clean fuel and replaces charcoal and firewood for cooking, reducing greenhouse gas emissions and pollutants. The consumption of clean fuel is a key factor for sustainable development and household welfare. Our LPG industry is recognized as a world-class by other countries. Just to give you some numbers, we have 100% of our cities served by LPG. Our consumption is about 35 million LPG cylinders a month. That's 7 million tons a year. In 2020, we increased the consumption of LPG because the COVID-19 effects. The population stayed more at home and LPG became more essential. We believe that Brazil can become a producer of Bio-LPG. Our energy matrix is one of the cleanest in the world, and we are a great biofuel producer. Brazil also has a credit carbon market to promote reduction of carbon intensity of our fuel matrix, called Renewable. And recently, we have launched another important program, the Fuel of the Future program. Brazil signed carbon offsetting and reduction scheme for international aviation, and we intend to develop a sustainable aviation fuel production in Brazil. Considering the process, which is already in the market, I mean hydrotreatment of bio oils in a biorefinery complex, we will have Bio-LPG production to be added in our LPG. I express thanks for Supergasbras and SHV Energy to open this seminar and to express my gratitude for your attention. And also, I would like to say thank you to Mr. Bram Graber, having a great event with renowned experts. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. José Mauro. So now we have a video from Simon Wood, also to open the session. Tainan, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Priscilla. It's a pleasure to be here today. I will share now the video from our Consul, Simon.
Hello, it's a pleasure to be able to join you virtually or address you virtually on the occasion of the first on renewable liquid gases. As you can tell, this is a recording. I'm not there in person. I wish I was, but circumstances have prevented it. I'm the Consul General in Rio, and that means that for the UK government, I represent everything we do in Rio, which is very, very focused on energy. It's very, very focused on renewables, on biofuels, and the energy transition. So from that perspective, it's an absolute pleasure to be here. It's very impressive to see the list of organisations taking part today. It's very impressive to see the list of organising bodies, including SHV Energy, including Aston University, the Federal University of Bahia, and the Federal University of Santa Catarina, organisations who brought us together. I'd also like to thank the Ministry of Mines and Energy, who are a great partner to the UK in Brazil. We do indeed work together very closely on that shared agenda of transitioning to a lower emission economy. So this seminar is very, very central to what I think is the core of UK-Brazil collaboration, and certainly it's very central to the work we do as government. We are encouraging the very best of science, technical and commercial collaboration. And today you have such high quality organisations who represent the very best in those areas. We're working together on a shared We're working together because we know that we have to decarbonize our economy. We have to do that through the best use of technology or the best use of resources, bringing in the of solar, of wind, of biofuels, and using the opportunity that our existing natural environment and agriculture affords to help us on that decarbonisation journey. So this is about reducing emissions, yes, but it's also about sustainability. It's about providing access to energy, to affordable energy. It's about helping rural communities improve their livelihoods and improve their energy security. It's very related to the work we do as government through our programs in Brazil. They are very focused in the same areas on energy transition, on access to affordable energy supply. We're focused on that through our energy program, which has a real partnership angle to it with a number of Brazilian technical and governmental bodies, not least the Ministry of Mines and Energy themselves. We're working together on Brazilian legislation such as Renewable. We're working together on ensuring the traceability of the supply chain that goes into diesel, for example. We're also working in green finance to help create the conditions in which the private sector will be ready to invest in these difficult to decarbonize sectors, attracting private capital, hopefully into projects in the Amazon, hopefully into projects that will improve off-grid power generation. Great to be able to support this. For us, it's really important to be doing this in 2021 as we prepare to host COP26. COP26, we're focusing on governmental ambition, national announcements to try and keep temperature rise to 1.5 degrees and to head towards a net zero economy. But we're also this is not just long term. We want this action to be happening now. So we're really focused on bringing together the actors that can help develop that ambitious real world action in the short term, not waiting decades, but actually changing our economies now, which again requires us to bring together the best of our scientific and industrial collaboration. And in that sense, I hope again that you'll have a fantastic set of discussions. Thank you very much.
Okay, so thank you, Taina, for share the video from Mr. Simon Wood. So in order to open our first session, Christina, could you share the presentations? Okay, so for the first block, for the session 1, to start it, I would like to invite Bram Graber, the CEO from SHV Energy, to talk about the SHV Energy vision for sustainable fuels across our business. So, Bram, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Priscilla, and good morning and good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Let me start with thanking full-heartedly the two preceding speakers, Mr. José Mauro Coelho, the Secretary of Oil, Natural Gas and Biofuels of the Brazilian Ministry of Mining and Energy, as well as Mr. Simon Wood, the Consul General to the UK's government's Brazilian Embassy, for not only doing us the honor of opening, but also their very focused and targeted support in the things we try to achieve here this afternoon and beyond this afternoon. I would like to spend a few minutes with you in trying to explain why this seminar and this kind of cooperation of brilliant and innovative minds is absolutely vital to the future of our company. And let me make 5 points there about who we are, what kind of a journey we're on. Thirdly, what we mean to our customers. I think that's the most important point I would like to make. And then something about our businesses in GB, UK, and Brazil. And then the journey on which we hope you will join us going forward. If I go to the first slide in explaining a little bit what our company is comprised of, we are a globally operating a supplier of LPG and other energy services to customers on 4 continents, so China, India, Europe, including Turkey and UK. And then Brazil is our largest operation, and we have a presence in the USA. Companies, independent companies working under their own name under one SHV Energy umbrella. And we recently added also a customer dedicated solar company to that in India, and a energy efficiency company in Europe. And being active in 25 countries with 16,700 colleagues means we have a quite an important accountability to stay relevant in society. Our company, if we go to the next one, if I go to our journey, does exist 125 years, our overall family company. But you don't exist for 125 years by always doing the same. Yes, we were always in provision of energy to our customers, and in the first decades this was coal, and later in the 50s this transformed to heating oil, and then since the 50s a quite substantial business in LPG, later supplemented by biomass and LNG, and since 2018 the first introduction in Europe of BioLPG, and then, as I just mentioned, the addition of energy efficiency and solar. And now we have, I think 2-3 months ago, and I think somewhere later in the program we will elucidate on that, announced with our largest competitor a consortium to make sure we add RDME as another sustainable molecule to our assortment. So the message of this slide is not the details of our history. The message of the slide is that we do realize to live as a company for another 125 years, we have to be innovative, read the sign of times, and make sure we make the right moves at the right moment. And that's where you also come in with your capabilities. If I go to the next slide, is what we mean to our customers, and that differs a bit between, for instance, Brazil where it's more a cooking market, and for the industry, it's an industrial heating market. And in Europe, UK, it's more a heating market, both domestically and industrial, and there's also some countries where we do transport. The real important message of this picture is we serve 30 million customers, and they deserve a role in the energy transition that is feasible and affordable to them. And that's one of the dilemmas of the current public debates about the energy transition. You can make any target going forward, but in the end, we will need practical, workable, technology-based solutions that customers can afford. Otherwise, it's nice to have a target, but in the end, the real transition has to come from energy providers like us, together with smart minds like you, to make sure we have these practical solutions. If I then zoom in just briefly, again, if I go to Brazil and the UK more in particular on the next slide, then we're very, very proud of our operations in Brazil and UK, but don't look at all the numbers. I just want to point out two numbers here. That's the number 10 million families served in Brazil. These families are today served based on LPG. That is already, as also mentioned before, a good step forward from other cooking fuels like wood or other solids. However, in the longer run, we also think in Brazil we have to take our customers along and keep serving them with LPG, not fossil-based, but non-fossil-based. And the same goes for our operation Keller in the UK, where close to 200,000 customers are served. We would like to continue with them, and also both industry and domestic customers being served with more sustainable solutions any time soon. And that brings me to my last slide and the most important message, why we need you. We believe that we should be on a journey and put our money and our commitment where our mouth is when it comes to transitioning our current molecules in the current infrastructure to molecules that are more sustainable, because they are less give less pressure on the environment, also in terms of CO2, and are not based on fossil sources. That has both a medium-term target in 25, we call that 25 by 25, and more importantly by 2040, which sounds far away but is closer than you think, we would like to have replaced all our molecules. And why is it so important that we bank on this kind of strategy? Is that means that in the transition, our customers can keep their appliances, they can keep their infrastructure, and by the way, also ourselves, while making this happen. And that means we think this is a very practical and meaningful way to help forward communities. Our standard providers of the LPG are not really the ones that will provide us most likely with the new molecules we're looking for. And that's where we reach out to all of you with your, as I said in the beginning, collective brilliant minds and collective innovative power. We consider this beyond competition. We need to move as a total LPG industry, and it's not that we as a company should be faster, but at least as a leader we should take our responsibility by stimulating the process and making these new molecules happen. They're not obvious. We have seen in the past few years, after we introduced BioLPG, many tracks that have a lot of potential, and we understand what we understand of these processes. You cannot guarantee upfront every new research will be a huge success. So we are willing to take together with you and to collaborate both with science and with other companies to take the right entrepreneurial risk to come up with the right solutions, practical and affordable for our customers, so they can continue to heat their home, to do the cooking and have a good transport. That's why this is a really important meeting for us. So thank you upfront for participating and working with us, and we're also looking forward to see this seminar as a stepping stone to further accelerate good ideas, science, research, and everything that follows after that to come to good solutions. So I wish you a very productive morning and an afternoon, and we count on you to help us and our customers on the transition. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Bram. So following our discussions, the session 1, I'd like to invite Dr. Kit Simons, the principal scientist from SHV Energy, to talk about BioLPG and the Open Innovation Challenge. Kit, please switch on your microphone and camera.
Thank you very much, Priscilla. So it's a welcome to speak to you and talk to you about how we can actually address the challenge and the call to action coming from our Chief Executive, Bram Graber. And that's, where are we going to get the BioLPG from, and how can we work together in an open innovation approach to discover those new routes and implement production. I've got a major exercise taking place, and we're using LinkedIn a lot for disseminating these findings. So please find me on LinkedIn and follow me. Next slide, please. So open innovation is what we do extensively within SHV Energy. We collaborate with multiple universities, technology organisations, and we want to increase those collaborations and those partnerships. We do this in cylinder technology, sustainable fuels, health and safety. We would like to fill the pipeline with ideas and take them through to market. We have a large, market pull, but we need technology from partners to deliver on that. Here are a few of the partnerships that we already have. You will hear from a couple of those today. Next slide, please. So why do we embrace open innovation? So SHV Energy, as Bram mentioned, has extensive logistics and retail capability to deliver LPG, take it from the factory gate in smaller and smaller vessels until we deliver it to our customers. We do that in the efficient and a safe manner. But the important thing is that traditionally we've not operated in extraction or production. We've not operated sort of beyond the factory gates. So this is something that we need to do now, and we need to work with scientists, biotechnologists and engineers to help us develop those routes to augment what's already been developed. Next slide, please. Quite what is our vision of renewable LPG, BioLPG, depending on what you want to call it, and generally what we're trying to do so that we can achieve the climate ambitions that we have as a planet is to decrease and eventually stop the amount of primary hydrocarbon abstraction that we're taking. The way we see the ecosystem in the future is we'll still need carbon, we'll still need renewable carbon, but the challenge is the abstraction of those hydrocarbons from the geosphere. So we've got energy, we've got solar energy, we've got wind energy, hydro, other sustainable energy forms that can make hydrogen, but we need to combine that with carbon, whether it's carbon dioxide from processes, maybe one day from the atmosphere, or carbon embedded in biomass from renewable feedstocks, or carbon which is already processed and in products, so recycling plastics and other wastes. Then combined with sustainable hydrogen, that renewable carbon becomes a hydrogen carrier. We can put that into chemicals, solvents, other materials, and of course fuels, so that we can power mobility, we can power industry, we can power warmth. And there we have a closed system. So we're putting less carbon into the atmosphere, which is increasing the pressure on the global temperature. We're members of the Renewable Carbon Initiative. If you're an industrial company, it's well worth looking at this initiative, and you'll be joining good company looking at how we can still use carbon. It's still in everyday chemicals, it's still in everyday fuels, but how can we find alternative ways to manufacture those carbon containing compounds that we require? Next slide, please. So there are multiple pathways to LPG. I think you'll hear in more detail about some of them today, but the majority of the biopropane, biobutane that we get at the moment comes from the HVO Haywood process. You hydrotreat vegetable oils, use cooking oils, and the majority product is diesel, kerosene, aviation fuel, and 5 to 8% of that is propane. And in certain countries, mainly in Europe at the moment, we satisfy our customers that want BioLPG from production using this method. There are many other ways to make BioLPG, but generally it's always a byproduct. There's very little on-purpose manufacture of BioLPG, and although we will work with the HVO diesel sustainable aviation fuel manufacturers to take their BioLPG and be able to deliver that safely to our customers, the big challenge is increasing supply so that we can satisfy all of our customer needs, not just a small percentage. So there's a big challenge for science and technology to look at different routes that can develop that, and we're here looking to work with you to collaborate with you in making that real. Next slide, please. So generally our R&D focus is taking feedstocks with good sustainability characteristics and making sure all the energy in that feedstock goes into BioLPG or other renewable energy products. Next slide, please. So to achieve that, we have the Sustainable Fuels Open Innovation Challenge. We're seeking pathways that can produce C3, C4, that's propane and butane, saturated hydrocarbons, propane and butane from sustainable feedstocks with high yields. It could be that people have ideas, the community out there, the scientific community, you can think about how to enhance some of those pathways that I showed before. It could be that you have a completely novel idea which isn't really considered, isn't really known as yet, but you could identify a process which ultimately could be commercially viable. And within the Open Innovation Challenge, we're looking at that final stage to production. If we can get that final stage working, then we can look at how we can deal with those upstream processes. Next slide, please. So what would we consider abundant and sustainable feedstocks? And that really depends on where you are in the world. So we're looking at indigenous biomass. So Priscilla, my colleague in Brazil, has told me that there's lots of different feedstocks available that you wouldn't get in different parts of the world. So, it could be that there's particular wastes from industrial processing, residues from manufacture. It could be that dedicated energy crops grow very well in a particular region, sugarcane, of course, in Brazil. But then the sludges, marine slurries, even industrial waste gases that could be converted. And then maybe we can actually really challenge ourselves and use algae, use the power of the sea to get our carbon containing feedstocks. And one thing, most of our feedstock at the moment is based on vegetable oils, used vegetable oils, and we prefer not to be looking at that because there's many solutions already and competing transformation pathways. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. Thank you. So how are we going to cooperate? How are we going to collaborate? We have two separate models. One could be that you're already a developer, you work for a company, and you already have a viable route to biopropane, biobutane, but there's just those final stages to achieve production. So it could be a feasibility study where we're prepared to fund up to €50,000 to take that technology to the commercial steps. It could be supporting a patent filing. It could be supporting a feed study to look at how we could commercialize that process. Please provide sufficient detail in a proposal to help us evaluate that proposition. But for many of you, if you're in a university, if you're in an academic institution, then you've got ideas, but the challenge is cash. It's funding that master's student, that PhD or the postdoc. And again, for feasibility study to try out those ideas, we're again prepared to fund up to €50,000. That is trying out those ideas so that you could later perform a full grant application, knowing that you've got some feasibility study behind you. It could be that 50,000 is enough, but you routinely can work with funding councils, and we've got some representatives later that can talk about large research grants that they routinely provide, but they quite often like industrial sponsorship and cash as well. So maybe one option would be to work with us, include us in that grant application, and that 50,000 euros could be levered with other, sort of funds from the state. Don't forget that the non-financial support that we can give, sort of direction, understanding of the commercial environment, always very valuable in a grant application. And again, in your application, please describe your research concepts and your technical capabilities so that we know that it's not only the idea you have, but also the ability to implement. Next slide, please. So what's next? We've partnered with a company called Innoget that work with many companies doing open innovation. And we have, if you look at SHV Sustainable Fuel Challenge.innoget.com, if you visit the website, you will find a slightly longer webinar than this where we describe the challenge. But you can interact with us. You can email us at sufuchallenge@shvenergy.com and ask further questions. Submit your proposals onto that portal. The competition has been running for a couple of months. There's a deadline for submission of the 1st of September, so please put in your ideas, put in your thoughts, follow the instructions that you'll find in the portal, and we will review those. Those that go through to the next stage, we will notify on the 15th of September, and by the week commencing the 11th of October, we will have a panel where we will discuss those ideas and then announce the winners at ABLC 2021, hopefully physically in San Francisco on the 27th to the 29th of October. So yeah, I look forward to engaging with you. If you've got any questions, you want to improve your ideas, then please do sort of message us, and we're quite happy to have informal discussions. Next slide, please. So please do stay in touch, and it's not just for this individual competition now. We're looking to build long-term relationships and hopefully deliver on the energy needs that you're going to be hearing about for the off-grid communities. And so I look forward to fruitful discussions today, and also maybe we'll get those research collaborations formed from the people that we have present here today. And I think a collaboration between the UK and Brazil, and indeed globally, I know we've got many people, we're looking to collaborate, please make contact with other people here, follow up, because the best ideas come at the interface of people and different companies, academia and government. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much for your presentation. So now I'd like to invite Sophia Haywood, Director of Public Affairs from Liquefied Gas UK, to talk about the renewable liquid gas from the UK perspective. So Sophia, please switch on your camera and microphone, and the floor is yours.
Thanks, Priscilla. Well, good morning, good afternoon. Firstly, thanks everyone for the invite today to come and talk to you about what's going on in the UK at the moment, the market for LPG and Bio-LPG moving forwards. It's certainly a very exciting space. Next slide, please. So firstly, just a little bit about us. So as introduced, I'm Sophia Heywood. I'm Director of Public Affairs for Liquid Gas UK, and we're the trade association, so the trade body for the LPG industry in the UK, and we cover the majority of LPG that is distributed in the market, but we don't just represent gas suppliers, we also represent the whole supply chain. So that includes, we have a UK refinery as a member, the equipment and logistics supply chain, installers, businesses that use a lot of LPG, again, are members of our body. And we do a number of things. I look after our government relations, public policy, and really, I guess, the strategy around how we move towards net zero. But we also have a really big technical and safety element of the organisation, which is really important to us. as well as other, events and networking, all the things that you would expect with a trade body. And one thing I would mention is we rebranded from UK LPG to Liquid Gas UK a couple of years ago. So just in case, you might not recognise the Liquid Gas UK name, but you may recognise UK LPG. Next slide, please. So just a little bit of a flavour about the UK market. The UK market is circa just over 1 million tonnes. The majority of that is going into commercial, industrial and domestic markets. They're the biggest areas of focus for the UK. We have over 3,500 people directly employed by the LPG industry here, and it's a sector that's growing, so we're seeing a lot of new jobs. And when we carried out this research last year, we were expecting 650 new jobs, just probably coming up to now in the previous 12 months. It's also a sector that is investing for the future. So it's a significant amount of money that's being pumped into the industry, 600 million, which will now be over the next 4 years rather than 5 years from when this was done, and over 100 million being invested in the last 12 months. So it's a sector that's ready for the future, and it's ready for the challenge. And it also, just as a whole, it turns over circa £1 billion. So it's a niche player, but a key player in terms of the UK economy. And next slide, please. So usually when I do presentations, I have to go through and explain what BioLPG is, but Keith kindly told me that I didn't need to go through that with all the experts on this call today. But what I just wanted to highlight with this slide is our 2040 vision. So we launched this back in 2019 with support from the whole UK industry, that we were going to have an ambition that we were going to be able to be 100% renewable by 2040. And this is in line with UK government's ambition, because you may be aware that the UK government have enshrined in law that they will be net zero by 2050. So it's non-negotiable, and there's lots of kind of targets in between. So it's a complex policy landscape, but here in the LPG industry, we're certainly up for the challenge. Next slide, please. What I thought I would just highlight is, following some research that we'd had done for the industry, just some of the opportunities for producing bio-LPG in the UK. Very, similar really alongside what Keith has mentioned in the previous presentation, looking at utilising things such as woody biomass with significant opportunities in Scotland. We've also seen, again, opportunities for co-processing of bio-oils and therefore bio-LPG as a product at existing refineries in the UK. And then looking at things such as RDF, so waste, where again you're able to produce maybe up to 300,000 tonnes of bio-LPG here in the UK market, with a smaller production capability that we see in the nations of Northern Ireland and in Wales. So there's quite a big focus on production opportunities in England and Scotland. Next slide, please. So obviously people will be going into detail later about all the ways to get bio-LPG and opportunities that are available. So I thought I'd just give a bit of a flavour as to what's going on in the UK. As you can see here through this amalgamated picture of Westminster and the worlds of policy and government, and then rural Britain and Northern Ireland, and yes, then maybe don't mash together very well when we have policymakers currently designing public policy. Next slide, please. So just some of the policy ambitions that we actually have here in the UK from government. No fossil fuels in new buildings from 2025 in England and Wales, and 2024 in Scotland. And there's also proposals that are coming in pretty swiftly for zero carbon heating systems in existing buildings at various trigger points. So, it could be when you sell your house, or if you're a landlord, when you're renting your property and you have a break in between, there'll be expectations for homes and businesses to change their heating system. And we think particularly for hard to treat, difficult to heat, less energy efficient, because of the fabric rural properties, that's where bio-LPG has a really, really key role to play. And that can be as a standalone solution, and also, in a hybrid. The other thing is just to mention is we're having a pretty big strategy come out of UK government on this. It's due out, it was meant to be anytime soon, but it's already been in the news this morning. It's not going to be out till autumn, so these slides are already out of date there. But I think it just shows how kind of swiftly changing this landscape is moving. Next slide, please. Oh, perfect. That one's absolutely fine. Oh, yeah. So just on the opportunity for LPG and Bio-LPG and why you can't take a one-size-fits-all. So where this opportunity, again, that we see the role for is we've got 2 million rural off-grid homes in the UK. The majority of them are using heating oil, so kerosene, and again, another good proportion of them are using coal. Now, there's an ambition from a lot of people to try and electrify most of these buildings, but actually, when it comes down to the reality of how they're built, their fabric, where they're based, potentially in exposed areas, they might be listed, have heritage status and particular character. But most importantly, I think it comes back down to cost. Bio-LPG and with LPG offers probably the most cost-effective solution to decarbonising these hard to treat buildings, where you might have to put in a lot of money with retrofitting and the upfront cost for electrification. And it's a mixed approach, so there's a mix of solutions, and we're a really key part of that mix of technologies. Next slide, please. So, I've been speaking a lot about what we think at Liquid Gas UK, and certainly what industry thinks. So we asked rural households across the UK, what do they think? How much would they be willing to pay for decarbonising and moving towards net zero, and what are their concerns? Again, nearly 9 in 10 people want the government to be able to allow them to pick what's best for them. Have a choice of different technologies, including Bio-LPG, being able to choose what works for them and their needs. And of course, depending on whether it's a business and the type of business, they're all going to have different demands. There's no one size fits all approach. The other thing just worth mentioning is that also there was quite a big concern that, if households had to have electric heating, they would want a backup system, a backup boiler. So again, I thought that was worth noting. If we could move on to the next slide, please. And again, a very colourful slide, but actually, the willingness there's a big conversation at the moment in the UK about who's going to pay for net zero. Is it going to be business? Is it going to be householders? Are they going to have to pay in some sort of tax? Is it going to be government? Are they expected to put out a 100% grant for any new heating system moving forward? And as you can see, the majority of people either couldn't really afford to pay for a new heating system, and if they were, they could only really afford to pay what we'd say is the rough cost of a replacement LPG boiler. So we're not seeing people being willing to spend grand amounts of money on retrofitting their homes or on a new electrified technology. If we could go on the next slide, please. So I've spoken a little bit about domestic, and it is a whistle-stop tour, so I'm sorry about that. If there's any specific questions, I'm happy to take them later or via email around the domestic market. But non-domestic, so as I already alluded to, the non-domestic market is a really key market for the UK, and that varies across so many different sectors. We've got hospitality and leisure is a really big market for us here in the UK, so caravanning, camping, rural hotels, coastal hotels, bars and restaurants, all the fun stuff, I say, that we all look forward to doing in our holidays. But also, a really critical fuel for manufacturing, growing fruits and vegetables, horticulture, health and care, heating doctors' surgeries, supporting British agriculture. It's hugely wide ranging. And if we could just go on to the next slide, please. I've just done one case study here of a rural pub and some of the options that might be available to them from a UK perspective as we look towards moving towards net zero. Now you can see we've got the different options there. We've got an oil boiler, LPG in its fossil form, we've got Bio-LPG, biomass and air source heat pump. So without going into too much detail around it, actually as you look to the future, Bio-LPG offers a really cost-effective solution when you're comparing things such as biomass or an air source heat pump, and particularly on biomass, on carbon offered in these modelling scenarios, they can come across relatively similar. But the one key thing that comes out of it is air quality. And air quality is generally focused here in the UK around urban air quality, and particularly in city centres. So it's a really severe issue. But actually in rural areas, as well. You know, air quality is still important, and you've got that. You know, one of the biggest benefits, isn't it, of LPG is that clean burning nature. It's the low particulate matter, the low NOx and SOx, and again, getting that with BioLPG, I think, just really makes it stand out compared to other low carbon solutions. If we could skip ahead 2 slides, please. Thank you. I won't put you all through another case study, but it's not just about heating. So, you know, in terms of space heating or hot water heating, you've also got process heat, and you've got LPG that powers machinery and therefore BioLPG as well. So, you know, one example just on forklift trucks is that you've got Coca-Cola in Northern Ireland are using BioLPG to power their fleet of 14 forklift trucks. You've got LPG being used by cake manufacturers, for example, for baking, or in the glass and ceramic sector. So it's not just about the kind of space and hot water heating element. Actually, it's got to be a lot more holistic. And again, it just comes back down to really the massive benefits you get with LPG and BioLPG, that versatile fuel that we, you know, hopefully many of us on this call all recognise that you can use this energy practically anywhere. I think sometimes that can get lost in energy discussions. So it's nice just to bring that to life. Final slide, please. So, I mean, that's just a whistle-stop tour of the UK market from me. Just going to mention it in case anybody is really interested in the UK market. We're actually having our annual conference on the 11th of November in York, in England. You know, should be in person, all being well. So, you know, if anybody is really interested to learn more about the UK market, then please get in touch, and we can talk about that and see what opportunities there may be. And also, if you have any specific questions about the UK market, I'm very happy to answer them. And likewise, like Keith said, connect on LinkedIn and have a chat. So, Priscilla, I think I'll pass back to you.
Thank you very much, Sophia, for your presentation. So for the next presentations, I'd like to invite Mr. Sergio Bandeira, the president for the Brazilian Distributor Association, to talk about the market impacts of renewables developments. So Sergio, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Priscilla. Good morning, everybody, and again, thanks for I want to congratulate Supergas, Braz, Calor Gas, Liquefied, and SHV for the initiative and to bring us the discussion about the renewables on LPG. Next slide, please. It's just a disclosure of our activities in Brazil. As an association, we are very concerned with ethical behaviors, and because we represent competitors, and so compliance on competition rules is very important to us. I have prepared a presentation here that goes through, firstly, in the first session, we go through the big numbers of Brazil, and you're going to see that the big numbers are really big here in Brazil. And then the second session, I go through some of the renewable development on fuels in Brazil. Next slide, please. As you can see, a huge country, and we have 6 million LPG residents using 6 million residents using LPG. 100% of the counties are covered with LPG, and we are the 50th worldwide residential LPG market. And LPG, next slide, please. LPG in Brazil is still being very, very tied to the cooking market. We have a market like Jose Mauro has mentioned before, 7.5 million tons of LPG, 33 up to 34 million cylinders are delivered door to door in Brazil. We are talking about 14 up to 15 cylinders per second delivered door to door. And we represent, LPG represents on the residential energy consumption 24% of the total consumption. Firewood is still being a very big challenge for us. those are the LPG association, the companies associated to syndicates. Next slide, please. The syndicates associates, they represent 95% of the total market in Brazil. We have a total of 20 distributors in Brazil, and as you can see, the market growth in Brazil follows, basically the dark blue bars represents mainly the cooking market, and so the growth of this market follows this trend. Next slide, please. Well, here this slide is just to show how we see the regulations for the LPG market in Brazil. In my personal opinion, we have one of the best regulations worldwide. The regulation guarantees freedom for the customers that can change from one brand to other brand anytime and can exercise all the purchase power. Distributors are very stimulated to develop service and products excellence, to build up loyalty from their customers, and cylinder quality is a huge issue for us, and the responsibility of the quality of the cylinders are very well tied to the distributor's brand, stamped on each one of the cylinders. And really, in my personal opinion, in our personal opinion, the regulations in Brazil, they stimulated a competitive environment for not only for us, but also for the retailers. That are more than 60,000 retailers working all over the country. And just to give you one idea, on the requalification of cylinders, we have an amount of 1 million cylinders requalified every month. Next slide, please. Here we show, some of the Brazilian energy mix, and it's interesting that the first picture on the left, you see the total numbers, and you see how important it is still being the diesel in Brazil, but also you see how renewable is our, how tied to the renewable is our energy mix. LPG represents 3.3% of the total energy mix, and you can see also that the natural gas is around 6.6, and so we do represent 50% of the total natural gas market in Brazil. And so LPG is still a very important energy in Brazil, and a matter of fact, it can grow a lot, especially in other markets not tied to the cooking market or the residential market. On the right side of the slide, you can see the residential mix energy, and you're gonna find that the firewood is still being a challenge for us. And so when Bram said that the development of new alternatives for LPG and even the renewable, when you talk about, we have to guarantee in a country, in a market like Brazil, that the social impact is so important. We have to guarantee that the new alternatives are going to bring us a very affordable product. And so you see here from the 2017 and to 2020, you can find that the firewood has surpassed the LPG usage on the residence, and that's really a challenge for us. And we see now the discussions on the Congress, and the Brazilian Congress, some discussion of some kind of subsidized or incentive of usage of LPG for the poorest people. Next slide, please. Well, here I bring to us, just to give a big picture, the transportation energy mix in Brazil. You're going to find that only when you talk about biodiesel and ethanol, we have a 32% of the total of energy consumption of transportation. That's really brings Brazil to a world-class development on renewable and biofuels, and that's a challenge that has been faced a long time ago and is still under development, and really is interesting. And I try show in the next slides how it has been developed. Please, next slide, please. Well, big numbers here on the biofuels, ethanol and biodiesel. You see on the left side of the slide, you know, we're talking about 33 trillion liters of ethanol, and it's divided on anhydrous that you use it to blend with the gasoline, and also the hydrous that goes mixed is used on the flex fuel engines for the cars. That's something I'm going to show on the timeline on the next slide. You know how it has been developed and how important is this flex fuel engines for the small size cars. Biodiesel compared to the ethanol is still on the first years, but we are talking about of 6.4 trillion liters year that are produced in Brazil. And the biogas is something that really just starting, and it's on the first steps, not the first years, but just on the first steps, but has a lot of potential. I'm sure that after my presentation, Pietro will be able to show you some of the perspectives for the near future of those products. Next slide, please. Here's a timeline of ethanol, and in Brazil, ethanol, the pro-alcohol experience, you know, it has started on 1975, and it goes through a very, very difficult challenges. We have experienced in 1987, 1995, we have a stagnant stage. You know, firstly, mainly because of price problems compared to the fossil fuels, and also the shortage of offering. And so when you talk about biofuel, you know, I always, you know, on my discussion, I always say that you have to guarantee a very affordable product, but also you have to guarantee the chain of supply of those products. And in 2000, after 2000, the flex fuel engines for the cars have played a very important place on the development of the ethanol program, because the cars basically, you know, they can run on ethanol, they can run on gasoline, and the customer itself, he can decide if he moves from one fuel to another fuel, and so gives a solution for supply and also for pricing issues. Next slide, please. That's the development of the biodiesel. You can see here the blend on the right side of the slide. You can see the blend of biofuel on the biodiesel on the diesel. You know, went up to 13% and dropped down on 2021 to 10%. Basically, it has happened because of the offering of products and the price issues. And so you can calibrate that and using this percentage of blend in the products. Next slide, please. Basically, that was I was trying to present just the big numbers of Brazil and talking about that that there is a lot of challenges in Brazil and opportunities for the LPG market. In my personal view, the new usages, the preparation for the new market and supply game that is changing here because of the presence of Petrobras, focusing on always in service excellence. And on the biofuels, the point I bring here for our discussion is basically that you have to guarantee the supply and also you have to guarantee that the product that will be offered will be affordable for our society. That's the point I want to bring now, and I'll be available for discussion. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sergio, for your very interesting presentation. Before to follow, just to remind you that probably now we have the chat working alive. So feel free, even along the presentations, to put your doubts, comments, and suggestions in order to feed up our session of the discussions. At the end of this first session, we will have a discussions mediated by Dr. Angelos from Aston University, in order to try to talk about these really interesting presentations that the speakers did. So in order to follow the presentations, I'd like to invite Mr. Pietro Mendes, for the Director of Biofuels, the Ministry of Mines and Energy. So Pietro, please switch on your microphone, and the floor is yours.
Hi everyone, good morning, good afternoon. Thanks Priscilla for the introduction. Thanks Supergasbras for the invitation to join this important conference. And I will talk a little about biofuels, Brazilian perspectives and scenario. I think that Mr. Bandeira de Mello has introduced how biofuels are in Brazil. Please, next slide. So just to give you some numbers, our balance energy, Brazilian energy balance, we can show that we are able to generate energy from renewable almost 50%, so 46%. Most of them come from sugarcane biomass, hydropower, firewood, and charcoal. And we believe that LPG can be a very good substitute for firewood and other renewables. Next slide, please. And when we look and when we compare Brazil with other countries, we can see that Brazil have 46% share of renewable in the energy matrix. When we look for the world, 13%, and just considering OECD countries, 10%. And we are increasing the share of renewables since 2014. We come from 39% and we achieved 46% in 2019. And why? Because we are increasing the use of hydraulic and wind power generation, increased supply of sugarcane biomass and biodiesel. We have a schedule to increase biodiesel content up to 15% until 2023, and reduction in the supply of mineral coal, 9% drop in steel production. Please, next slide. And how we are preparing our future. We have a public policy called Renewable. Renewable is the national biofuels policy implemented through law number 13,576 from 2017, and the main objective is to promote the expansion of the production and use of biofuels in Brazil's transportation matrix. It is the first carbon credit market that is operational in Brazil. In 2020, these are the key results. CBIOS is the decarbonization credits. I will explain further how it works. And we issued 18.5 million CBIOS. CBIOS traded almost 15 millions, and the financial volume is 650 million reais, and the average price of CBIO 43 reais. And 43 reais, considering the average of the last years, is something like $10 per ton CO2 equivalent. Please, next slide. Considering Renewable, Brazil was chosen as one of champion in the energy transition by United Nations. So we submitted a high-level dialogue on energy Renewable Bio commitment as a voluntary commitment called Energy Compacts. So we intend to reduce the carbon intensity of our fuel matrix in 10% until 2030, considering the baseline of 2018. So we are starting from 73 grams CO2 equivalent per megajoule and goes to, in 2030, 66 grams CO2 equivalent per megajoule. And we believe that with this reduction of the carbon intensity, we will have the cumulative reduction of 620 million tons of CO2 equivalent in this period. Please, next slide. And how Renewable works? As I told before, is our credit carbon market to reduce the carbon intensity of our fuel matrix. So we have the national targets for emission reduction that is determined by National Council of Policy and Energy, and ANP, that is the regulatory authority in Brazil responsible for biofuels. They break these national targets according the commercialization of fossil fuels made by fuel distributors. Another axis X2 is certification of biofuels production. So each biofuel producer is certified considering the life cycle assessment from well to the wheel, and they receive a grade. According to this grade, or how they are able to reduce the GHG emissions, they are able to issue CBIOs, decarbonization credits. Each CBIO is equivalent to 1 ton of CO2 equivalent that is avoided into the atmosphere. So we have in the stock market the commercialization. Distributors has the obligation to buy CBIOs, and biofuel and import producers are able to sell CBIOs in the stock market. Please, next slide. And talk a little about our GHG calculator, RenovaCalc. RenovaCalc was developed by a scientific group in Brazil, led by Embrapa. Embrapa is recognized as one of the most important companies in research here in Brazil. And according to RenovaCalc, is able to determine the life cycle assessment, considering from the well to the wheel, and establish efficiency note scores per biofuel producer. So if you reduce the CO2 equivalent and increase your megajoule of generation of energy, better is your grade. And another thing that is very important, considering biomass to be eligible, they need to come from areas that we don't have deforestation. No deforestation is permitted since 2018 to avoid that the expansion of biofuels promotes deforestation in Brazil. Next slide, please. And what we are expecting with the future. As Mr. Bandeira told us before in the previous presentation, we have in Brazil, considering light vehicles, just three options we have for light vehicles. We have gasoline C, that we have E27, 27% of ethanol content. We have hydroethanol is E100, and we have NGV and biomethane for light cycle vehicles. So we are expecting with this carbon market that we will be established the anhydrous ethanol consumption, considering 2021 until 2030, because we are not expecting the expansion of use of gasoline C, and we are expecting the increase of production of hydrous ethanol and consumption, E100, because considering the credit carbon market called Renewable, people will have the stimulation to use a sustainable biofuel. So we are coming from, considering hydrous ethanol, from 24 billion liters in 2021 and goes to 35 billion liters in 2030. Please, next slide. Considering biodiesel, it's not possible to buy in Brazil just fossil diesel. Every diesel has nowadays 10% of biodiesel because government need to reduce the biodiesel content considering the soybean price, but we are expecting to come back to 12% on September and come back for our planning to increase the biodiesel content, and we are expecting to achieve B15 in 2023, and we're expecting for this year the consumption of 7 billion liters in 2021 and goes until 2030, 11 billion liters. And we are studying the introduction of green diesel or renewable diesel and co-processing diesel. And the work group will finish its work until October of this year. Biodiesel here in Brazil, we are considering just transesterification process. Please, next one. And recently, we just started 2 weeks before the public policy called Fuel of the Future. We want to decarbonize other transport sectors because, as I showed before, we have a public policy to reduce the carbon intensity of gasoline and diesel, but we need to work to have sustainable fuels for aviation and for maritime. And for aviation, Brazil has signed the international agreement called CORSIA, and we are in the obligate phase that starts in 2027. So Brazil needs to have the production of sustainable aviation fuels. And in the South America, we will start the production of sustainable aviation fuels in Paraguay. It's a Brazilian company that is investing in Paraguay, and we hope to have the same investments of biorefineries here in Brazil using half a process. So we believe that we can have BioLPG in this context. Companies start to produce sustainable aviation fuels, and we have in this kind of process that of hydrotreatment of vegetable oils and fat animals to have the production of BioLPG as well. Another object of this Fuel of the Future is integration of public policy to recognize national vehicle technology. So Brazil is leading the energy transition. India is following Brazilian steps, considering to use more ethanol content in your gasoline. Recently, United Kingdom has approved to use of E10 as well. And we have technology of flex fuel fleet and technology to produce biofuels. Second generation biofuels is developing in Brazil right now. We have a great company here that starts to have a commercial production to stimulate energy efficiency and energy transition. And Brazil is already a global leader in the use of biofuels recognized by United Nations. Please, next. So these pictures come from Repsol. So it's just to clarify what is the idea. If we have the production of biojet and we want to establish a mandate for biojet in Brazil, probably we will have the production of biopropane that can be mixed to LPG. We take care a lot about our LPG industry. It's very important for us because poor people use a lot LPG. There is a huge impact in the price, and government is always taking care with the increase of the costs of LPG. But we believe that biopropane can be produced in this context of the biorefinery, so LPG distributors can buy biopropane. Next slide, please. So this is my final slide. Thank you so much. I'm here and available for the discussion. Thank you, Priscilla.
Thank you very much, Pietro, for your interesting presentation. So I'm not sure if Karen is live or not yet. Yeah.
Hi, Priscilla.
Hello, sorry. So now I'd like to invite you, Karen, that is a research assistant from Aston University, to talk about the socio-economic impact on LPG in Brazil. So Karen, so if you can please switch on your camera and microphone, and the floor is yours.
That's fine. At this point, I'm unable to switch on my camera for some reason. Hello?
Okay, right. So yeah, but I don't know if we have some technical issues. Sorry for that. But if your mic is working,
yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. Hello, everyone. Thank you so much. My name is Adobe Karen Ifed, and I'm a PhD student at Aston University, and I will be talking about the socioeconomic impact of BioLPG in Brazil. Next slide, please. So the overview of this presentation, I will be talking about the bioenergy and energy transition in general. I will look through the literature review of the topic at the moment and the LPG market, just to brief some of the LPG market in Brazil. I'll discuss the policies, the important policies in Brazil that helped in the adoption and promotion of LPG, the key factors of energy transition, and I will also talk about how we intend to study this socioeconomic impact of LPG adoption. So I'll be looking at the entire economic process. And also I will present to you the model in which we've established. Next slide, please. Right, so bioenergy provides the largest share of renewable energy at this time. So according to the IEA, it accounts for 10% of energy usage as opposed to the 4% of other renewable energies. It mitigates the climate change crisis at the moment, and this is because of its negligible carbon footprint. And it enables employment generation and creates opportunities for shareholders for energy firms. And it also supports the decentralization of energy systems. It also, bioenergy also enables, it sort of shields energy firms and countries from the volatility of oil prices, because the factors, bioenergy is created by factors such as the feedstock. So it's not susceptible to fossil fuel price volatility. And it reduces household air pollutants, which is a big contributor for respiratory diseases. And yeah, so energy transition basically is the transformation of energy from fossil-based energy to a zero carbon energy system. And this is enabled through bioenergy, such as innovations in bioenergy, such as biofuels, BioLPG at this moment, smart technology, policy frameworks, and market instruments. Fuel stacking is a way in which households, most especially, become energy efficient in the sense that they use alternative energy sources in their houses in order to, as a result of affordability, in order to just be efficient in their house. So you would see a situation whereby in rural areas they would use fuel wood and LPG together in order to be more energy efficient. This, although it is energy efficient for these households, it is also a deterrent towards the energy transition from a fossil-based to a zero carbon emission goal. Next slide, please. So numerous studies have been put out towards the economic impact of bioenergy. Just focusing on LPG in Brazil, Janeiro has in 2013 have spoken about how the policies have impacted BioLPG production, and they talk about the establishment of the subsidies and also auxiliary gas social programs that were implemented to be able to enable affordability in Latin America as well, and in India. Gold and Oppenheim in 2018 also put out a paper which indicated the importance of policies in enabling LPG adoption, especially for the rural areas. So they talked about a social program called Ujwala, which encouraged giving funds to rural areas, rural households to be able to afford 13 kg LPG gas canisters. BioLPG is quite novel at this point, so there isn't any paper at the moment that I have found that discusses the socio-economic impact of BioLPG. But there has been some reports and papers that have been put forward on the biodevelopment of LPG and also the business possibilities that can come about towards adopting BioLPG. Next slide, please. So basically, the LPG market has been quite prominent in Brazil. The LPG market has been quite prominent in Brazil. Brazil, which was predominantly a traditional biomass country, has kind of diversified to a more modern energy mix. And there has been, from the 1950s, it established the 13 kg canisters and brought about new distributors into the market. And LPG accounts for 98% of the households in Brazil and 93% of rural households. So the market is there, and consumption has increased throughout the years. There has been infrastructure and logistics being put in place to enable the adoption of LPG in Brazil's households as well. So if we look towards this next graph, please. So if we look towards this graph, it basically just shows the trends in terms of production, consumption, and the trade. So consumption, this is in terajoule, is substantial, which is good. And this was promoted. This, I would say, was promoted through the vast marketing campaign that was put forward for LPG adoption in the early 1950s towards to now. There was a vast marketing campaign and policies that were implemented to enable the consumption. And this basically it's been a success. Production import in LPG has been able to support the consumption as together with the in-house production of LPG in Brazil. Next slide, please. So as I indicated, policies in Brazil here were an important factor towards adoption. Subsidies are being put forward. Thank you. Subsidies are being put forward to be able to enable affordability of LPG, especially in rural households, because affordability was an issue to afford these 13 kg canisters. And however, in order to decentralize the market, these subsidies were removed in the year 2000, 2002. And as a result of this, fuel wood consumption increased. During the course of the subsidies in Brazil, the fuel wood consumption decreased because it's cheaper, it's relatively free, especially for households to just go and just get fuel wood and use. However, a result of, in comparison to the price, it was a direct substitute. So when this was removed, you would see that fuel wood consumption increased because of affordability. And as a result of this, in order to help in order to enable the affordability, the Brazilian government put out affordable social programs to enable affordability. So they put out the auxilio gas, which were gas vouchers that were given to the families. And also they established the family allowance program as well. And this was a success. Next slide, please. So if you look at this graph, you would see this is a graph indicating the price of 13 kg canisters from 1973 to 2001 to 2017. So if you look at from 1973 to 2001, you would see that the prices are substantially diminished, they're reduced, and this is the period where the subsidies played an important role. They were implemented in the market. However, from 2002 to 2003, the subsidies were removed quietly, and this shot up the prices substantially. However, the social programs were implemented in order to ensure the affordability of these LPG canisters, because rural households, most especially, would just use the cheaper substitute, which is fuel wood, and it is substantially more harmful to the environment. Next slide, please. So the key factors that impact energy transition is income. So like I indicated, because of affordability issues, income was a big determinant. So in order for you to be, income was a big determinant, and this was more apparent in the rural areas, which had a lower GDP per capita as opposed to more urban areas. So affordability was a big issue for rural households. And the government, the Brazilian government, understood this and implemented social programs in order to make sure to enhance the adoption of LPG in rural areas. Accessibility is also a factor for energy transition, and this has actually been done substantially well in Brazil. So about 1% of municipalities in Brazil don't have LPG distribution centers, and as opposed to the 99% of areas. So distribution and infrastructure is a big factor in Brazil, and it's been done extremely well. Effective policy and infrastructure, as I previously indicated, the implementation of auxiliary gas and the family allowance program enabled this energy transition, as I'll show you in the next slide. Because the closest substitute is cheaper, which is firewood, and it's easily accessible to rural households, they would just use that as opposed to LPG if the LPG price increases. So it's quite sensitive, and the government understood this. So the price of fuel, the price of fuel and price of substitute. So these are factors. So if the price of an alternative increases or decreases, it impacts the consumption of LPG. Awareness. So in terms of awareness, so there are situations whereby they aren't quite sure about how to use LPG canisters, or concerns about safety, and through marketing campaigns and social networks, this has been able to be curtailed in Brazil. Next slide, please. This next slide shows the energy consumption of cooking per type of coal. So I'm going to compare fuel wood. It compares fuel wood and LPG. So looking through the quadrants for 1 and 2, for 1, there was no direct intervention by the government, and you would see that fuel wood was more apparent. And in 2 and 3, you would see that LPG becomes more apparent. The consumption increases, and during this period, the government intervention was there in terms of the subsidies and also the social programs that were implemented to enable affordability. And if you look at 4 and 5, this is it becomes, at this point, LPG increases, and LPG consumption increases, and it's well embedded in everyday cooking practices. Next slide, please. So this particular slide, so I'm looking at the regions in Brazil. So, and if you look at the northern part of it, it explains the consumption of fuel wood versus LPG, which is LPG versus a direct substitute fuel wood. So in the northern part is categorized by a lower GDP per capita, lower income bracket, as opposed to the southern side. And as you look at the northern side, fuel wood consumption is way higher than LPG, and this is because of affordability and income. So it is a big determinant towards energy transition. So, and if you look down in the southeastern part and the south part, the southern part of the country, you see that LPG is more apparent than fuel wood. Next slide, please. So we are looking, so in order to understand the entire socioeconomic process of BioLPG adoption, we're looking at these various factors. So we're looking at the land use and competing from the final use. We're looking at this feedstock, the price of the feedstock, and the market structure behind the feedstock as well. The catalyst and the engineering in developing, in converting the fossil fuel directly to BioLPG, the cost of BioLPG, the price and the sources of energy, the alternative sources of energy, the cost and the market structure, the logistics and market behind it. And what we're currently looking at now, because of data availability, is the consumer preference, the income, the price of alternative sources of energy. So we're going to be looking at that and how factors such as government policy and exogenous shocks affect this entire system. Next slide, please. So what we need at this moment to estimate the socioeconomic impact is we need to estimate how consumption of LPG responds to the changes in LPG prices, the price elasticity of BioLPG. We need to estimate how much higher BioLPG will be as opposed to LPG and other alternatives. And we need to estimate the benefits that can come about from using this source of energy. Next slide. Next slide, please. At this moment, we're focusing on the first point when we're looking at the relationship between the LPG price and consumption. So the assumption as a result of data availability, we don't have as much data because it's still a very novel topic. Well, we are assuming that LPG and BioLPG are indiscriminable for consumers in terms of their energy properties. And we use statistical analysis to estimate the responsiveness of LPG consumption to changes in LPG prices. And we control for income per capita because, as I've indicated before, income is a big factor towards a big factor that impacts LPG consumption, especially in the rural areas, and also the alternative sources of energy, the prices of the alternative sources of energy. Next slide, please. So this is the model in which we have. So we've modeled LPG price, the income GDP per capita, and compressed natural gas price as in relation to LPG. And looking at it, just by looking at the model, you see that LPG price and LPG consumption has a negative relationship. GDP per capita and LPG consumption has a positive relationship. Compressed natural gas prices has a negative relationship, but it's not as statistically significant. Next slide, please. So this indicates that the results indicate that a 1% increase in LPG price results with 0.18 decrease in consumption. This indicates that LPG demand is inelastic. That is, a 1% change in price will result to a drop in the consumption of LPG in less than 1%. This basically also shows that in a situation where BioLPG is adopted and used in the market, it would have to be the affordability of it has to be considered, especially by the company and also the government as well, in order to ensure the effective adoption of BioLPG. And also a 1% increase in GDP per capita in the income leads to an increase in LPG consumption. This indicates that LPG is a normal good and its consumption increases as income increases. So several studies I've looked through several studies, and they basically indicate several studies that have looked towards giving LPG gas canisters for free. And this has the respondents of these studies use the LPG gases as opposed to the fuel wood. This indicates that affordability is a significant issue when it comes to consumption or adopting this LPG, and using it as opposed to the fuel wood or less or highly using it as opposed to fuel wood or any carbon-based sources of energy, highly carbon-based sources of energy. So compressed natural gas appears to be a complement to LPG. This highlights the stacking argument, in the sense that households will use different sources of energy in order to be energy efficient because of affordability. So you see in the urban areas where they're more sustainable, they would use electricity and LPG, as opposed to the rural areas, which are less sustainable, where they would use more fuel wood, and they would use LPG. This basically shows that affordability is a significant part to what in terms of Brazil, affordability of LPG gas canisters is a significant part, and policy frameworks is a factor that has attributed to the success of LPG and can potentially be a factor that can attribute to the success of assimilating BioLPG into the market. Yes. Next slide, please. Thank you so much, and I appreciate your questions. The references for the data and the studies are listed in the presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Karen, for your very interesting presentation, and congratulations for this study. to follow our to close our first session. Now we will have discussions based on the questions and the comments that I could see in the chat here. So I'd like to invite the speakers and also Dr. Angelos Delis, lecturer from the session from the Aston University, to mediate these discussions and read the questions. And so the floor is yours.
So good afternoon, Priscilla. Thank you for the introduction. I will begin with questions as they appear in chronological order, if I can. So the first one is from Felicity Carey, and she's asking Sophia Heywood that the UK government was described in today's Guardian as being over-reliant on as yet non-existent technology with regard to its targets and the roadmap for 100% renewable fuel. How realistic are their expectations for reaching those targets, do you think?
Thank you. Thanks for that question. It was a great question. I haven't seen the specific article, so I might answer it in two parts. One based on heating and one based on transport, because they are very much looked at in isolation by UK government. I think firstly, it most likely might be to do with transport, because the UK government released a new transport decarbonisation plan yesterday, which had lots of very grand gestures, but maybe not very much public policy sitting underneath what those gestures were. Whether it's realistic or not, I think there's a really big opportunity for the UK to invest in biofuels, and with that, opportunities for Bio-LPG. Do I think that UK government at the moment are doing as much as they can in that space? No, I don't. So I certainly think that there's more opportunity there to grasp, and I hope that following this strategy, they will be more open to doing that. On the heating side of things, then 100% agree that the majority of heating is currently bargained on using heat pumps. They've got very, very big goals for rolling out 600,000 heat pumps in 6 to 8 years' time, which isn't obviously very far away. And actually, they're not a one-size-fits-all solution that they like to position them at. They've certainly got a role to play, but actually other solutions, things like Bio-LPG, other competitors in this space, they all have a role to play. So hopefully UK government will begin to recognise that as we work with them over the coming years. I hope that answers the question.
I think that covers most of the parts of the question. Thank you very much, Sophia. So the second question is for Mr. Sergio Bandeira from Lucas Matos, and Lucas Matos is asking, how hard do you think it is to actually migrate from LPG to BioLPG in a country such as Brazil, where a lot of people still use traditional, in quotations, energy sources such as firewood? Is the cost side of BioLPG play a vital role in this development?
Thanks, Lucas, for the question. Really, like Karen has mentioned on her presentation, the income is a huge issue for the fuels transition, and so we have to. There is no mistake on this. Really, here in Brazil, we are one stage before. We are still moving firewood from the house. And LPG is the option, is the transition, is still being the transition, but it means that we have to live together with the Bio-LPG development and this transition from firewood to LPG. And so basically, I do believe that we have, and I know that the government is facing this challenge and trying to work out subsidies that can work better for the poorest people. And so really, I do believe that even with the challenge we have and this stage of transition that we are delayed compared to the rest of the world, but we have room for discussion of biofuel and opportunity for biofuel, but government policies are going to be very important for development of biofuels. That's that's really one thing that cannot be solved by the market itself. So we're going to have some intervention from the government.
Great. Thank you for the answer. And I find very interesting the whole conversation in the chat. I'm an economist. I know very little about from the engineering side, but it seems that pricing is a very important part of this question. And as Mr. Bandeira says that government has to intervene. So the next question is for Pietro Mendes, that what are the government policies to facilitate this? So there is a question from Silvio Vieira de Mello, and says that Brazil had many difficulties to make biodiesel economically feasible, as one of the reasons was the logistic strategy due to the continental dimension of the country. Taking in mind that biomass production is very sparse in the Brazilian territory, how does the Ministry of Mines and Energy see the perspective of decentralized production of BioLPG in Brazil? Does the government have a policy, has some ideas and agenda about this?
Thanks, Mr. Silvio. Thanks for the question. So we believe that when we are talking about BioLPG, we have a huge advantage because it's a drop-in biofuel. So I think that is not necessary. We can control the quantity of BioLPG, considering the whole quantity is not to apply different from biodiesel from transesterification process that you do not have, for example, how to achieve B100 without changing the engines. I think that BioLPG is a drop-in biofuel, so we can use, for example, in some region more and another that you don't have the biomass production, nothing, and in the balance use the same quantity. But as Mr. Bandeira de Mello explained before, we are facing a huge challenge to low LPG price, considering that we have families here in Brazil that they don't have income enough, and they come from LPG then goes to wood and other things that is the worst for the energy transition. So this is why we believe that BioLPG, we are not intent to work now with a mandate for BioLPG. But of course, if we have a biorefineries, they will produce BioLPG. They can use a part of this for energy for the biorefinery, but they need to sell BioLPG, and we believe that they can sell for the LPG distributors, but we are not intent to establish a BioLPG mandate because nowadays is a challenge for the Brazilian government how to reduce the price of the LPG and maybe to have a subsidized. We try to reduce the federal taxes, but federal taxes is very low here in Brazil. We have state taxes that have a more impact, and the federal government cannot control state taxes, and is a challenge. Energy transition prices, is not just a simple equation, and we do not have a simple answer.
Okay, thank you. I have a question. There was not something direct for Keith, but I have a question. So maybe it's related to all this discussion that from his understanding of the market in Brazil, because we saw that Brazil has a very high consumption of LPG and production, but it has to import. So production does not meet consumption. And maybe this could be informative for the policymakers as well. Do you think that Brazil has a potential with new technologies coming to be a world producer of BioLPG, and then not only benefit from the environmental issues like reduction in emissions, but also provide jobs and opportunities to businesses to flourish?
Was that a question to myself?
Yes, yes.
Well, the answer is yes. We do know that HVO, diesel, sustainable aviation fuels will be coming to South America, including Brazil, and BioLPG will be a byproduct of the present process. That will require used cooking oil, triglyceride, feedstock, and then that's just the present technology. As and when technologies are developed, I mean, in my Open Innovation Challenge that I was talking about before, SHV Energy is looking for transformation technologies based on indigenous feedstocks. I was meant to go to Brazil last year, so I haven't actually seen indigenous feedstocks in Brazil with my own eyes. But the researchers on the ground, when they start thinking about can this feedstock be transformed into BioLPG, is one of the opportunities we're looking to encourage. I think in the subsequent sessions, we'll hear more and hopefully inspire the researchers, because I think energy security is going to be important, using the existing infrastructure on the customer side, on the distributor side, but production will be more egalitarian. You're not just relying on history as to where those fossil deposits went.
Okay, thank you. There are several not direct, but I think indirect questions that relate to Karen's presentation. One is from our colleague from Aston University, Jude, on Wooldy, and says that from a technical perspective, any dedicated process to make bio-LPG would deliver a product that's more expensive than fossil LPG. Can the viability of bio-LPG depend mainly on its environmental sustainability benefits alone? And he asked then further questions of whether there are business plans to make it more affordable, would be a minimum content, which are more technical. So Karen, what do you think about the pricing issue of bio-LPG and its affordability and adoption to a large scale?
So thank you so much for the question. It's a very good question. So right now, what we've seen in the model is that price is a contributing factor towards LPG on its own. So in a situation whereby BioLPG should be adopted, it has to be a price either matching or lower than the alternatives. The thing is, at this point, we don't have as much data in a disaggregated level, but I'm assuming that if I model if I add substitute alternative sources of energy, possibly diesel or fuel wood or another renewable energy, the price, we would see that consumption of LPG would either reduce or increase dependent on that price. So in a situation whereby BioLPG would be adopted, it has to be able to match the price, and it also has to be able to, in terms of the infrastructure has to already be in place in order to, in case of any additional costs, like possibly a new canister or a new type of system to be implemented in order to adopt the LPG into the household. So fixed cost has to be lower, but based on what I've seen, I think assimilation would be easy in terms of the infrastructure, because it's already been put in place and distribution channels have already been put in place for LPG. So that adoption in terms of bio-LPG would be fine. So I think it has to do with the cost side, the production of it. So if they can keep the production low enough for them to still be able to maximize profit and affordability for the Brazilian consumers. Yeah.
Thank you, Karen. Yeah, and I'm collaborating with Karen on this project on the socio-economic impact, and to some extent, we're trying to find out what would be the overall effect of adoption of bio-LPG, that's why we made this first step by estimating this elasticity. Now we have to rely on literature to find what are the benefits to humans, that is less deaths because less fuel wood's going to be used, and other adverse health outcomes that are related to these traditional types of fuel, and also what are the benefits to the environment itself. So we need to price this, and probably will rely on existing literature, and then to see how, because the cost is going to be to consumers, price is going to be higher, so consumers will have to pay. So this is the cost. So we need to find out whether the benefits outweigh the cost, and at the end, if this is true, then it might be a room for government intervention, as Mr. Bandeira said earlier. So but this is a policy decision, whether the government is willing to take this step.
Could I just make a comment? Thinking about solar, thinking about wind, 20, 30 years ago, it was very expensive. And that's where governments did intervene to support the growth of a nascent industry. We need to get all renewable, sustainable energy forms into a commodity status. so that they can operate without subsidy, it will take time. And unfortunately, of course, the dilemma is we don't have that time, but it will still take time to do that, to bring low carbon and no carbon solutions to market. And this is where governments do work with industry, work with academia to drive down those costs, and then look for technological innovations that can achieve that. You know, it won't go to all the markets all the time. So, you know, certain countries will innovate, certain countries will, you know, lag, and that's quite right. But I think we will see the transition. There's a global movement to achieve it, so I'm looking forward to it.
Thank you.
And sorry to interrupt you, but probably we need to follow. I know that the best part always is the discussions between the speakers based on the questions for the participants, but mainly to try to follow our agenda. I suggest that perhaps after the presentation, we can try to address the questions for the speakers.
There's quite a lively debate in the chat, so people can continue the discussion there. Thank you very much, Priscilla.